So you think you can't cook. This week we're going to be baking one of my favorite side dishes, northern baked beans. It's super simple. It requires only a handful of ingredients, and before you know it, you and your family will be enjoying one of my favorites. Let me show you how it's done. First, we're going to take 10 cans of butter beans. Now let me stop and tell you for a second here that this is a rather large recipe. You can cut it in half at any time, but I always make a bunch because people tend to want seconds. So we're going to take 10 cans of butter beans and put them in our slow cooker. We've already strained these butter beans before putting them in to make sure all the juice was taken out. And we've also looked through each of the cans to make sure there were not very many empty husks, because that doesn't really taste very good when you're making a casserole. So we're going to continue to put all of these cans in the slow cooker. Just a few more. A little bit of juice being left behind in the can is okay. We just don't want a ton of it because we don't want this to get really soupy. Which is ironic because the next ingredient we're going to use is condensed tomato soup. You're going to use 1 can of condensed tomato soup per every 5 cans of your butter beans. So we're going to go ahead and pour this in and use a spatula to scrape down all of the remaining. And then we're going to take our second can and scrape it. After that's done, we're going to use the same spatula to mix the beans and the tomato soup. Now for this, you're really going to want to use a spatula instead of a spoon. A spoon might be a little bit too hard and could break up some of the beans as it's stirring them. So we're just going to use a soft spatula and gently manipulate the beans around so that the soup can get down through all of the layers. There, that's pretty good. Next, we're going to take half a pound of bacon that's been diced up. You can cook this bacon any way that you want to, but just make sure it gets to be fairly crisp and then dice it into small pieces. We're going to sprinkle the entire thing in, and again we're going to use our soft-sided spatula to mix it in. We're almost done with this recipe. Is your mouth watering yet? Once all of the bacon is mixed in, and you're going to want to make sure it's evenly distributed through all the layers. So once that's mixed in, we're going to add one last ingredient, which is pepper. Don't add salt, because remember, your bacon is already very salty, but just add a little bit of pepper to taste. Personally, my family likes pepper, so I tend to add a lot, but you're going to want to put it into your own taste. Mix that in one more time to get it evenly distributed. You might want to add another sprinkling of pepper, depending on how deep your pot is. And then we're going to add an ingredient that we're not going to eat, but that's going to be used to flavor the casserole as it's cooking. From my onion saver, I'm going to take half of an onion. I prefer to use white onions. Yellow onions would also work well in this recipe. And I'm just going to stick it halfway down and cover it back up with my bean casserole. Now that everything's mixed together, we'll go ahead and place the lid on the slow cooker, turn it on to low, and we're going to let it go for a couple hours cooking. Now, every half hour or so, you are going to want to go in with your spatula and stir it around to make sure nothing's sticking to the sides. But otherwise, you can pretty much enjoy this recipe as you go on about the rest of your cooking. My family likes to eat ham or hot dogs with these baked beans, but it might work well with a variety of different foods. You can also try using different kinds of beans in this recipe. In the past, I've heard of people using kidney beans or navy beans, or really any kind of bean that you prefer. It just needs to be a fairly firm bean so that it doesn't become mushy when this is cooking. So you think you can't cook? Well, now you can.